monsters, madness, and magic.
Alright, folks, welcome to the Monsters, Madness, and Magic podcast. I'm your host, Justin, here with a quick word before we dive in. Now, in this episode, I chat with actor, musician, and writer Beki Lantos about life as a child actor, Goosebumps, starting her career on Are You Afraid of the Dark, songwriting, performing live, and more. As always, thank you all for listening out there, and without further ado, here you go. Okay, Beki, so take us back in time. You're a youngster. Are you a book reader, fort builder, troublemaker, or all of the above?
All of the above.
That's my preferred answer.
yeah, definitely. All of the above. Yeah. I didn't do forts as often as I probably would have liked, but I was very fortunate. One of the houses we had when I was a kid, my bedroom was in the basement, and my closet was underneath the stairs, and there's this big space behind, which was underneath the stairs, and I put a mattress and a light in there so I could read and just hang out in there. It was fun.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it was very cool.
Well, to start with books then, did you have a genre or a writer that you leaned towards growing up?
Actually, funny enough, I never got into the Goosebumps books, but I loved the Fear Street books. I had oh my God, I don't know how big of a collection. I ended up selling them later on. But I loved the Fear Street books when I was younger. But then I got into the fantasy genre, and I'm a huge fan of David Eddings. I don't know if you're familiar.
I'm not.
Yeah, no, he's not as mainstream as like Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or anything like that. But it's another, chosen one kind of story, having to save the world kind of thing, which is, it includes gods and that kind of stuff. And it was really cool. And it was more his style of writing that really spoke to me. As much as I enjoyed The Hobbit, I couldn't read The Lord of the Rings because I just found it was too detailed and too descriptive. Whereas David Eddings really focuses on like the character building and the relationships with the characters and stuff. And I love that. So yeah, I've read all of his books, and that was my big go-to then, was fantasy series. I tried the Sword of Shannara series, and I don't even know what else, the Dragonlance series, all those. I've read all those types of books.
What were some of his books?
So the first series that I ever read, I think I was about 11 or 12, was called The Bulgariad. And It's a series of 5 books. And the first book, I think, is called Pawn of Prophecy. Yeah.
Okay. I had to check those out.
Yeah, it's really, really good. I've tried to get my son to read them, and he won't read them, which is funny because he loves Lord of the Rings and all that stuff. But maybe he likes the detailed and and the long, drawn-out detail stuff. But
See, I was into the Goosebumps books, but I never got into the Fear Street books. But I loved Christopher Pike. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but it's sort of the same thing.
You know what? I have not thought of Christopher Pike since you just mentioned, but yeah, I think I must have read some of his books, but I think I was like, R.L. Stine's got it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So, what kind of troublemaking are we talking about?
Well, I mean, I would do stupid stuff with my sister, I remember one time, I have no idea why, we were little, and I decided I just wanted to get on my, lying down and just roll across the street. I don't know why. And so, of course, a car came along. We weren't on a busy street or anything, but a car came along and stopped and went to the door and was like, "Do you realize what your daughters are doing?" Just stupid things like that I have no idea why. And then I did cause trouble at school. I liked to socialize a lot. I was diagnosed with ADD later on and stuff, but I liked to socialize and stuff. And just this silly things like that. Nothing really crazy until my teenage years, and that was just a whole other trouble.
Did you grow up in Canada?
I did, yes. I grew up in the Ottawa area. We lived on the Quebec side when I was young, till I was about 12 or 13, and then we lived on the Ontario side. Born and raised in Ottawa. It's a great, beautiful city, proud of it in many ways, but it was just not the city for me. I'm glad I don't live there anymore. It's a very government town, very, quiet. It likes to say that it's cultured because it has festivals, and Broadway across Canada goes there for the theater and stuff like that. But honestly, it never felt that true to me in terms of its culture. Like I live in Hamilton, which is outside of Toronto now, and this is culture. Like there's so much different, wide variety of things going on all the time. And maybe I just wasn't like it wasn't visible to me when I was in Ottawa, but
Yeah.
yeah, I never really liked living there. So
So, were maybe your parents or someone close to you, were they creatively, artistically inclined? Do you think that's where it came from?
yeah, both my parents actually. So my mom learned how to read music and was a piano teacher as well as a drama teacher. And my parents actually met in the theater.
Wow.
So yeah, they're both in a production. I want to say of like Pippin or something like that. I can't remember the name of it, but that's how they met. And so my dad was into theater as well. But my dad is actually, um, I mean, it's big talk, but he to me he should have been a producer. He's got such a great ear for music, and when I listen to his stuff from his band in the '60s and the '70s, um, it's just beautiful stuff that I could totally, if he had been able to get to know Joni Mitchell and Crosby, Stills and Nash, like I think he would have been another pea in their pod kind of thing, because it's just such beautiful and he's got such a great ear for it. But yeah, he never left Ottawa to try. And so he was in a band in the '70s here. I think they got interested by like I can't remember his name. There was a guy who was very, very heavily involved with CBC, and he was interested in them and wanted to sign, and I think the band broke up or something like that. I can't remember the whole story. But yeah, so he was a closeted talent for the first many years of my life, and then when I started expressing interest and then started doing local events and stuff like that, and then I actually ended up winning a local competition for singing, and then my dad was like, oh, like this is a thing, and he started getting involved after that. So
Wow. So, since we're on music, what sort of records were spinning around the house when you were growing up?
oh god, my dad was a huge collector. We had, I don't even know, like floor to ceiling, wall to wall rooms of CDs when they came out in the '80s. Yeah, so we had everything. I mean, we had obviously Crosby, Stills and Nash in the '70s, folk rock, which is my all-time favorite style of music. But there was also classic rock like Heart. But then, you had the tried, trusted, and like super famous Michael Jackson's, Phil Collins, the Beatles, of course, was another big one. We listened to a lot of the Beatles. But it's funny, like my dad collected the stuff and loved music, but he wasn't a very hands-on dad. So there wasn't a lot of like, oh, come here, kids, you got to listen to this album. Like I've seen and heard and read stories of artists who grew up in those kinds of houses. And I was always like, oh, I wonder what it would have been like if I had that. But there definitely was a huge collection. But a lot of my exploration in music has been my own
Okay.
kind of stuff. Yeah. Hmm.
So, would you consider yourself a collector now these days?
I tend not to collect physical things just because I don't, to me, it's just like it's a lot to clean up and organize and stay on top of. I do have a small record collection of records that I absolutely adore. I've got some Heart in there, some Crosby, Stills and Nash, some Eagles, that kind of stuff. And then there's a few in there that are, my husband's that he really likes. And there's a couple in there that are my daughters that that I inherited from her after she left for university. But yeah, and I have a few books. There are a few books that I keep. Normally I go to the library or, those little libraries on the outside people's houses and stuff. I'll usually take books from there and then exchange and that kind of stuff. Unless there's a book that I like that really impacted me, then I'll go out and buy a copy and keep it. But I don't have many.
Yeah, I love those little, I guess, side of the street libraries. I don't know what they're officially called.
Yeah.
But my wife and I like to, we'll take a book and we'll put like this ridiculous horror book in there and like hope somebody grabs.
Yeah, you can definitely see some very interesting genres sometimes that I'm just like, oh, I don't know if that should really be in here. Yeah.
What up? You grew up around music. Were you a big? Did you like to go to concerts early on? Any live shows?
I don't remember going to concerts when I was younger. The first concert I remember going to was a Celine Dion concert. I was a huge fan of hers when I was younger. Her and Bette Midler were my idols when I was little. And this was just after the The Color of My Love album came out. So it was like The Power of Love and all those big, huge songs for her. And of course, her being Canadian too was even more like, inspiring for me. And I remember my dad got us tickets to go. We went as a family, and I don't know how he did it. Somehow he got us backstage passes. So I actually got to meet her.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really cool because I remember the show ended, we went backstage, and then her husband, who's now passed, Renee Angelo, was behind or was ahead of her or behind her, I can't remember, but he was with her and he was like pushing her past us to be like, come on, we gotta go. And she like made a point of going like, no, I've got fans here. And she came in and talked to us and took a picture with us, and it was really nice. It was very sweet of her.
That's a great memory.
Yeah. So that's the first concert I ever remember going to. I went to music festivals and stuff, where they would have like the Foo Fighters, Smashing Pumpkins, the Tea Party, Green Day, Our Lady Peace, Moist, I Mother Earth. The 90s were so fantastic for those things. And I went to a few of them, but honestly, I felt it's really funny. I have no issues being on a stage, but standing among thousands of people watching, I get really uncomfortable. And I've had a few brushes with not very comfortable situations. And so now if I go to a concert, I'm like, let me make sure we have a seated area so that I feel safer, and I'll stand up and like get involved and dance around. But I like to know that I'm like, this is my assigned space and you're not supposed to be in my space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I prefer to go to, like a small local bar show rather than a festival, because there's thousands of drunk people out there and people are crazy.
No, for sure. I would love to do small venues, but they're dying. They're dying here in Canada. I don't know about in the States, but it's just like unheard of. These big, huge stadiums where tickets are like $300 to $500, and that's for the nosebleeds, and it's just like unaffordable.
Yeah. I listen to a lot of metal, European metal, and if you went to Europe and saw these bands that I like, you'd have to go to some huge festival like we're talking about. But when they come to the States, they'll play like a 1,000 seat venue, and it's just very cool because it's cool for the band too, because they're used to these big venues, and then they get this personal experience in the States because the music isn't as big here. Yeah,
no, my husband is a huge fan of a band called the London Suede, or just Suede, and they're from the UK obviously, and he never thought we would ever be able to see them because they're over the pond, as they call it. And we always kept saying, 1 year we'll go there, we'll go to the festivals, because we've heard amazing things about the festivals in Europe and stuff, and we've been told by friends that are there that you need to come, you gotta go, but it's not cheap, you gotta take the time off. It's a lot of work. So but miraculously, Suede was performing when we were living in Vancouver at the Commodore Ballroom, which is like 1,000 people, and he found out, and he was just over the moon. And it was awesome because it's this just small enough venue, and you can like literally almost smell the sweat from the stage, and really feel the energy of like them feeding off the audience. It's amazing. It's so much better than these massive concerts, but it is what it is.
Agreed. So was it always the voice, or did you pick up an instrument or anything?
So it started out with the voice. I started out musical theater kind of thing. That's how I found a love for singing and acting. And then I just started singing locally with, he called himself the singing policeman. And he would basically go to schools and retirement communities and that kind of stuff and just sing old hits and stuff. And every once in a while he'd just pick up these kids that would also wanted to sing. And I kind of toured. It's not really a tour because it wasn't official or anything, but I would do events all around Ottawa with him singing songs from like The Little Mermaid and that kind of stuff. And then when my dad got involved, because I got onto a way before Canadian or American Idol or any of that stuff, there was a reality show, contest show here in Ottawa, or not here, but there in Ottawa, called Homegrown Cafe. So it was just about kids from that area and what talents they had, kind of thing. And I made it on the show and I won the finals, which was awesome. And that's when my dad got involved, and he started writing music for me, which was great. But it was a lot like adult contemporary. Sometimes people were like, you're kind of young to be singing that kind of song, because it's all about love and, feeling betrayed by your lover and kind of stuff. But and then when I was probably about 11 or 12, I wrote my first song, and it was just on the piano. I'm not a pianist in any shape, way, or form, much to my own and my mother's chagrin. I took lessons for a while, and then I couldn't stand the teacher and the format, and I was just like, no, let me do it. And of course, I regret it because I never took the time on my own. But then when I was probably 13, I decided I didn't want to do solo anymore. I wanted to join a band, so I started learning guitar. And my dad, again, he wasn't super hands-on, so like every once in a while I could go to him and go like, how do I play this chord? And he would show me, but most of the time I would be like, oh my God, I just invented a chord. And then I'd find out later on, like, that's an F. Like, you know, but, you know, so it was all self-taught. And then actually when I said that I wanted to be in a band, I learned how to play bass guitar. So I played bass guitar, and in the band was my brother, who was lead guitar, my older sister, who was the keyboardist. My dad played rhythm guitar, and then we kind of adopted our drummer, and we were in a band for about 6 years in the 90s. So
Wow. You still play?
I don't play live anymore. I keep telling myself to go out and do open mics, but sometimes it feels good and then sometimes it doesn't. So it can be difficult. I have a lot of emotional, I mean, trauma is a heavy word. I don't mean it that way, but like a lot of emotional difficulty around music and singing for me, just because of so many things that have happened over the years. But I still play at home. I still play like 3-4 times a week, sometimes for half an hour, sometimes for 3 hours. And I'm like, oh crap, where did the time go? You know, and sometimes all of a sudden I'm like, oh wow, I just wrote a song and I haven't written a song in several months. So yeah. Yes. I do love it. It is a part of me. I can't ever not do it, but I don't know, sharing it with people, I'd love to, but I just don't know how to do that anymore. It's not as simple as it was in the 90s, where you could just call a place up and be like, can I play on your stage? And they'd be like, sure. You know, nowadays it's more difficult.
Yeah, they want to know your Instagram followers and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I'm not into social media. I am on social media literally just to share my blog, though, which I'm imagining that's maybe where you found me.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and I've wanted to put up music and stuff, but like I'm not an engineer. I don't know how to record, and I know everyone's like, oh, but it's so easy. But even like I did try to get on TikTok. You could probably find me if you looked, and there's probably some videos of me playing guitar, but I just found it so overwhelming trying to stay on top of, you know, posting regularly and then learning to edit. And then like it would take me 3 hours to edit like a, you know, 45-second video. And I was just like, yeah, I'm out. This is not for me.
Yeah, it's not. You can't just be an artist anymore. You have to also be your own social media manager, a content creator, whatever they want to call it. It's just it is overwhelming. I agree. 100%.
Yeah, and that's just not a side that I'm ever interested in. And I know I've had people say like, well, that's a little spoiled, when I'm like, I would just love it if somebody who was in the business was like, hey, come on, I can help you build this type of thing, you know, and like, obviously it would be a quid pro quo. Like I wouldn't just use them for, you know, kind of thing, but that doesn't exist anymore, where they come up and go like, oh, I want to sign you, you know? So.
But it is good that you still play, because, you know, I write short stories and stuff, and I really don't care if I ever sell them. It feels good to me. It's just creating something for yourself, and it scratches that itch from time to time.
Yeah, it took me a really long time to learn how to enjoy doing it for myself, because I started at such a young age and it was my identity for so long. And then because it was my identity, it really got wrapped into my self-worth. And like, so if I didn't have an audience, if I didn't have people, you know, praising my abilities, or if I wasn't getting the jobs for acting and stuff, it really affected my self-worth and value. And so that caused a lot of ripple effects branching out in negative ways. And so, yeah, it took a really long time. And I mean, people tried to tell me like, Beki, if you love it, do it for you. But I couldn't grasp that concept until probably in the last 5-7 years, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But it's good that you're going back to your roots a bit.
Yeah. Trying to.
I guess to shift focus a bit, sticking with your childhood, when you think back to formative films and TV shows you grew up on, what comes to mind?
Oh God. When I was really young, it was musicals. I loved like Annie. Annie was great. I actually got to play Annie in the local theater when I was 11, which was fantastic, and I loved it. You know, Oliver Twist and Sound of Music, Newsies, all that kind of stuff. Like I just loved it. I just ate that shit up. Pardon the shit.
No, you can say no, we're good.
Oh, okay.
Say what you want.
Cool. Yeah, no, I just loved it. But then like in terms of film, like I love Star Wars. I'm a huge, and I'm not one of these like, oh, but that doesn't follow the story or that doesn't follow the like, no, I just love the entertainment of Star Wars, the escapism, the wonderfulness of it, and the creativity of the universe and like all the planets and all the people. Because the actual story of Star Wars is a very typical, chosen one trope and all that kind of stuff. But it's still beautifully told and wonderfully done. But what else? I'm trying to think. Really, Schindler's List was a big one for me. Yeah, I really loved that movie. It was the first time, like I'd seen black and white movies, of course, but I'd never seen it done in such a, artful way and in such a masterful way where, having that little girl's coat be basically the only thing standing out kind of thing. That really impacted me. I can't think of any really off the top of my head. It's a good question though, but there's just so many of them.
You mentioned Newsies. That's funny. Have you ever seen Gangs of New York?
I've not. No. Why? Is it good?
Yeah, it is. It's but have you know what it is? Like the movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, Leonardo DiCaprio.
And Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah.
So it's one of my favorite movies, and it's very intense and like violent, and I avoided it for the longest time because for some reason I thought that was the movie version of Newsies.
Oh.
And it's just funny how it's the complete contrast, and I just avoided one of my favorite movies for so long. I'm like, I'm not big into musicals, and people are looking at me like I'm crazy.
It's not for everybody, right? Not like my husband never was really big into musicals. He got into them a little bit because of me, and I was like, come on, like.
I have since I've gotten older. I have, yeah.
I mean, because even if you don't like them, because sometimes this is the thing, they have to be done correctly, right? Sometimes you can watch them and just be like, I'm not following this at all. And it's not even sometimes the musical's fault. Sometimes it's like the production, you know what I mean? Because I've seen just absolutely horrendous productions of Rent and Chicago, but I've also seen amazing performances of those as well, right? So it's just like it totally depends. And this is the thing, if in your formative years or at any time you're introduced to musicals for the first time, if you happen to just see not a great production of it, it could really sour you on them for a long time, right? So yeah.
And as I've gotten older, I can appreciate. Me and my wife, we love going to the theater. One of our things is every Christmas we'll go to see the Christmas Carol at the local theater, and it's a great production for such a a small.
Which
area.
version though? Which version?
Oh God, you put me on. I had no idea there were different versions.
Oh my God, there's like so many versions of Christmas Carol. Yeah.
Oh no, I don't know. Then it's a part musical, so it's kind of like that kind of thing.
Oh, okay, musical one. I don't know which one that is. Interesting. Because there's one that I grew up on. It was a black and white version. And I can't remember. I'd have to look it up. I can't remember, but we watched it every year. My dad made me watch it. And I was always like, this is so boring because it's black and white and it's a Christmas Carol, which, has very deep undertones and nuances that as a child, you're like, ugh.
Oh, movie-wise, yeah. I meant like a live performance, live theater performance.
Oh, okay, live theater. I'm so sorry. I misunderstood that.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, that's a good show too, Christmas Carol. It is a great story.
But movie-wise, I like the George C. Scott version.
Okay, I'd have to look that up. Is that like black and white old days?
It's the one after the black and white one. I think it's in the 60s or 70s. It is color though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know that one. I know the black and white one, and I think the main guy's name was like Alistair or something different. And but anyways, we watched it every Christmas, and every Christmas I was like, ugh. But now as an adult, I'm like, oh, I'd love to watch that version. It's funny how that happens.
Yeah. And a question I like to ask everyone, and you can take whichever direction you want to. What scared you as a kid?
Honestly, I didn't mind being scared, so I didn't get scared easily. I think that's why I really liked the Fear Street books, because to me, it's the same thing. I remember when I started performing at the age of 8, people were like, oh my God, don't you get nervous? And I'd be like, no. But then I remember somebody describing, because I was like, I don't even know what does nervous mean. And they were like, it's when you get that tingly feeling in your stomach. It feels like butterflies are flying all around, and you feel like you could throw up sometimes, and maybe your heart starts to pound a little bit. And I was like, oh, well, isn't that scared? And so to me, it was just, but and at a young age, I was very much like, "Ooh, I like that. That's kind of cool, that feeling." And so like I loved the scary books, and I loved, the only thing I never got into was scary movies because I just didn't find them scary. I thought they were kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah.
It's hard to find actually scary movies because unfortunately, visually, you can't do justice to what your imagination would do. So like I loved when it came out, Blair Witch Project. I thought it was genius.
Oh God, it got me good.
It was so good. And like, especially since the whole campaign was like, this is real footage, right? And like my boyfriend and I went to see it at the time. This is when I was like 15 or 16. And then we had to walk home through the woods. And I was just like, oh, like, but it was a feeling that was like, oh, this feels good. Like I'm alive right now.
Yeah. And that just goes to show you they had no budget. It was just the two directors were just film students. They had a camcorder. They went in the woods, and it was it's one of those things you had to be there for. That's what I tell like younger kids. It's like they don't get the Blair Witch, and it's like, man,
I know.
It was insane.
It was so cool. It was very cool. The only ones that I've seen recently that I was kind of like, oh, those are actually pretty good were Insidious. The Insidious ones.
I like Insidious too.
Those are cool. Because again, there's not a lot of visual to it. There's a lot more mental to it. And I was just like, then that's the stuff that gets me.
Very atmospheric as Insidious, like especially just like the intro music will just give you chills.
Yeah, for sure. Whereas like I remember like when I was young, we would have sleepovers and stuff, and they'd be like, "Oh, let's watch The Exorcist," and I would just get bored, and I would just, and I'd be like, "This is dumb. It doesn't even look real," So, and so my friends were just like, "Hey, we're not inviting her to the next sleepover."
So you did musicals and you were on stage. So it sounds like you never had to deal with stage fright ever.
Not that I can think of. No. Once I'd been out of it for a while, and then I was in a band a few years ago when I lived in BC, a cover band. I joined, and the first couple shows I could feel the nerves for the first time, and I was just like, oh, that's what people were kind of talking about, because I was like, it had been a while since I'd been on stage like that performing, and there was a lot of new songs for me, even though they were covers. I didn't. And that actually, to me, that's harder to learn because I didn't write them. So, so yeah, that was the first time that I was like, oh, this is okay. I'm gonna be okay though. I'm gonna be okay. And then once I got up there, it was fine. And I was just like, I feel at home when I'm performing. So.
And I was speaking with an actor recently, and he also never had stage fright. So I asked him, in your opinion, people that do experience it, where do you think it comes from? And he said, it's almost like a fear of ridicule. Yeah. And but if you're ultimately prepared and you know your shit, then that's not there. You'll just be fine.
I totally agree. Actually, it's very well said, because like I've never been able to do improv. And even with my music, like people are like, oh, we should jam sometime. I get really nervous doing that, because then I'm like, what if I don't sound as good? What if I'm not as well versed as they are? What if I, especially since like I don't know how to read music, and even guitar chords and stuff, like I'll still tell you like, oh no, I invented this one, and then they'll be like, Becky, that's like a C minor 6. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, like so I always worry that like, oh God, what if I come across as a bit of an idiot? And it's the same with improv. Like, what if it's not funny? Like I have so much respect for comedians. Oh my God, getting up there on stage and it's literally just you. And you have to keep everyone's attention for whether it's 3 minutes or an hour or more. I'm just like in awe. I think it's amazing that people can do that. I've told myself I should challenge myself and try it sometime, but I haven't had the guts yet.
Yeah, and getting started in comedy has to be terrifying. Once you get to a certain level, your people with the same sense of humor are going to come to the show.
Yeah.
But you're an amateur going up on stage. Everybody's got their own sense of humor. They're like, who is this guy? And you got to make them all laugh.
Yeah, no, exactly. I've got a friend here in Hamilton who she does it. She does the amateur, like, there's 4 or 5, maybe 7 people in the audience, and like 3 or 4 of them are your friends kind of thing, and she doesn't always get roaring laughters, but she goes up there every time, and I have so much tremendous respect, and I think she's funny. She actually, I told her this the first time I saw her, she reminds me of Chris Farley. She does a lot of the like physical stuff.
That's
And
one of
I'm
my
like,
favorite actors of all time.
yeah, I was like, when I told her that too, I was worried she was going to take offense, you know, because you never know what people's likes or dislikes are. And she was just like, oh my God, that is the best compliment you ever could have given me. And I was like, good, because I meant it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just growing up, there was a handful of celebrity deaths that really punched me hard, and it was Chris Farley, Jim Varney,
Mm.
and the Crocodile Hunter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Michael Jackson hit me hard. Um, there was one not too, that's funny. Like, I can't think of them when I'm on the spot, but like then when I hear, I'm like, oh yeah, I love that, you know. But Michael Jackson really did hit me hard. I always thought I would see him one day, and it just came so unexpectedly,
Yeah.
you know. And I know there's a lot of controversy around him because of the allegations and you know what all that stuff. I don't know what the truth is, and there's no way of me knowing. But damn, the man could freaking sing and perform and write music like you know almost like no other.
Agreed completely.
Yeah. So
So it's pretty clear where you stand on the Michael Jackson versus Prince debate.
you know what though? The thing is like I feel like I'm really good at even if it's not my jam, I'll still respect an artist for what they can do. There are amazing songs of Prince that I love, like Purple Rain is great, you know, Raspberry Beret, obviously Kiss, you know, and I don't know if it's called Party Like It's 1999, but that song, like,
Yeah.
you know, those things. And like, and I've even found like some of his music in movies or shows that I'm like, oh God, that fits so perfectly there, you know? So I have tremendous like respect, even if it's not my jam, you know? Because it doesn't mean they're not good. It just
Right.
means it's not my liking or my taste. Yeah.
So would you say you had more fun as a kid performing theater on stage or music?
Well, I did more music than theater. I did Annie, and then that was almost it. Because shortly after Annie is when I did the reality show in Ottawa, and when I won, you know, I one of the grand prize was 8 hours at a studio, and I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but my dad kind of negotiated, and I ended up recording a whole album.
Wow.
At 11, and then it was all about, oh, we've got to promote this album. So like I feel like almost every weekend I was out, you know, doing events, like just singing at local, you know, fundraisers, retirement homes, schools, if there were celebrations or festivals or any of those kinds of things. Like Winterfest was a big thing in Ottawa. I don't know if it's still called that, but and actually I shared the stage with Alanis Morissette there when way before Jagged Little Pill.
Wow.
You know, and Moxie Fruvis. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They were a big Canadian band. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of a taint to them now because the lead singer was up on charges for sexual assault. But but they had great music and they were really nice to me when I was a kid and I worked with them and stuff like that. So like, so most of my experiences were just me on stage singing. Though I did do some musicals as I got older. I was in 9 to 5, a musical, and Legally Blonde, a musical. But as an adult, it was really different. It was definitely more magical as a kid.
Yeah.
And especially like, I mean, don't get me wrong, the theater group that I did it with had very few adults in the show. It was literally a theater group for kids. So most of the cast and crew were, you know, teenagers, young adults, and maybe like obviously the guy who played Daddy Warbucks was a full-grown adult and that kind of stuff, and Miss Hannigan and stuff, but majority was kids. So it was just like, it just felt like this utopian, you know, we would get together for rehearsals and just have a blast, all these kids with a few adults who were making the costumes and sets and all this kind of stuff. Whereas as an adult, you know, I got involved with the organization, volunteered, I was on their board and stuff, and then it just became all the politics and all the crap. I was just like, it ruined it for me, and so I stopped doing it there. Yeah. So.
You were talking earlier about, you know, your current relationship with music and how you kind of struggle with it a bit. Do you have any desire whatsoever to try theater again now that you're a bit older?
I've looked at it sometimes. I've even like peeked in and like had meetings, like, or just kind of said like, oh, I just want to learn about your organization, and, you know, gone in and met somebody who gave me a tour of the spot and whatever. But I just think that most of the ones that I find, it's such a huge time commitment. Some of them it's like 3 nights a week and 4 or 5 hour rehearsals on Sundays. And I just remember, I don't know how I did it at the time that I did as an adult, because my kids were little. So thankfully I had this amazing partner who's like, yeah, go do it. And he had no issues with me being gone so often. I was very fortunate with that. But yeah, now I just kind of go like, I don't know. It just seems like such a huge time commitment. And I don't remember loving it enough to be willing to give that much of my time to it, kind of thing. I think it would be different if I had like a group of friends and we were all like, let's do this together. But just being a stranger walking in off the street and not knowing the politics and the cliques and this kind of stuff of people who are involved already, it can be a little overwhelming and challenging. So I don't know that I would.
I can't blame you.
Yeah. It's a shame because it really is a beautiful, art form, and I have such tremendous respect. Like whenever we have the Fringe Festival, I don't know if you guys have something like that where you are.
I don't think so.
So Fringe Festival, there's one in Ottawa, and then the one here in Hamilton is quite big as well. It's basically anybody who has like either a one-man show or like a comedy show or a play or anything like that, you can put it in to be part of this festival. And then for however long the festival, I think the festival runs for 2 weeks, and there's several different locations and there's shows going all the time, and you can buy passes, for specific days, for specific shows, for that kind of stuff. And so like every year I try and buy passes and go see at least 4 or 5 shows, also to support local artists, because it's not easy, especially in theater. It's really, the live stuff is dying.
It really is. Yeah,
it's so sad. And so when I hear about, people trying to put on a show, or, hey, I'm going to go stand up on stage for 3 minutes and try and make people laugh, I'm like, I will be there and I will try and support you as best I can.
Right. And it's strange to say that's like the silver lining to the whole COVID situation was it kind of revived, at least around here, it revived drive-ins, which also helped revive the movie theater a little bit, because it was kind of sinking.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I don't think we have a drive-in here, though I just moved to Hamilton last year, so I'm still not familiar with everything. But the theaters seem to be doing okay, though I know they brought back $5 Tuesdays, which I'm really happy about.
Yeah, it's made a resurgence post-COVID. It really has. People missed it, I guess, because they couldn't go.
Well, it just became so expensive to just go see a movie, right? So it was kind of like you almost had to save it up for waiting for that 1 or 2 movies of the year that you really want to see on the big screen. Whereas back in the day when they were like $4 each, you would go see like 1 or 2 every month, and if you didn't really care, I don't know what this is about, let's just go see it. Like,
yes,
it really changed the way things progressed.
And one of the things I miss the most about those days is just the thrill. It sounds weird to say thrill of going to the movie store, like your local mom and pop video store.
I know,
and just browsing, and 5 movies for $5 for 5 days or whatever it was, and
yeah,
you didn't know if they had the major releases, they only had like 5 copies of it, so you didn't know if they were going to have a copy for you. I just miss that so much.
I know, it's like the anticipation of it too, right? The whole like, oh, what is there going to be and what can I get and that kind of stuff. And I know, something my kids will never be able to relate to.
Yeah, I've always said if I ever hit the lottery, I'm just going to open my own mom and pop video shop and just sit in it all day. I don't care if anyone shows up.
So you'll be like Jack Black in that record store movie. What is it called? High Fidelity.
Yeah, that'll be me, just looking at my own VHS tapes. So, on your blog, you have a lot of poems and short stories. Is that something you started doing early on too, or was that later in life?
Oh yeah, no, I've always been a writer. I never believed I was a writer. I always was just like, whatever. I never thought of it. I just did it. I wrote my first screenplay when I was 13. It was a super epic high fantasy, like would have cost millions of dollars to make. So like I knew it was never going anywhere. Plus it was written by a 13-year-old. So, but it really opened up like the floodgates of creativity and in terms of fantasy in my brain. And so I've been writing forever. And so I've just finished I guess last year, or maybe it might have been the year before, I finished the first draft of my first like fantasy novel. first in a series. And so I'm actually querying literary agents right now
Good.
to see if anybody would be willing to take me on and help me navigate how to get published and all that kind of stuff. And I know everyone keeps saying, "Oh, just publish it yourself." Again, I'm not interested in having to promote myself. I'm not interested in trying to find a reason for people to buy my shit. I just I just want it to be out there, and if people find it, great.
Right.
You know. So, but yeah, so I just did that, and I've actually written a couple of books in a series of like middle child fantasy books that I did, and actually my niece and nephew have really helped inspire me to keep writing that because they love them. And then what else is there? And I've finished probably 3 screenplays now, and I have a mentor who's she's in the Canadian side of the business, and she's always worked in kids television, so it's not the same genre, but she makes a living in that kind of stuff. And so she's been mentoring me and helping me, and she says it's just about ready to see if it can get picked up somewhere. So
I'm rooting for you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, thanks.
What does your typical writing process look like? You a heavy outline, or do you like to go with the flow and fix it?
Oh God, no. Yeah. God. Like, I'm not all about these people who like to overshare and give excuses or reasons, but like honestly, the best way to explain it is I'm so ADHD in my brain. I'm not hyperactive, I'm not impulsive, and I can control, but I am very like, what is interesting for me right now? That's what I'm going to work on. So which is great, but it's also very challenging because that means I have like 50 projects on the go at a time. And it also means those 50 projects will take 10 years rather than one of them each taking a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
because I'm not very good at disciplining myself and going, okay, no, I need to finish this now if I want this to become an actual thing. Even with my screenwriting, it was funny, just at the beginning of COVID, I guess, somebody who had worked on the crew of the film I made when I was 13, the Frankenstein and Me. She worked on the crew. She reached out to me randomly and was like, "Oh, I was looking through these old photos and found one of you," and she shared it with me and was like, "Hope you're well." And we just started talking because I remembered her very fondly. She was very kind to me and wonderful on the set with my mother and I. And we just started talking. She was still in the film industry. She was in school for film writing and this kind of stuff. And so I started sharing some of my stuff with her, and she loved it. And so we started coming up with this, sharing each other's projects and this kind of stuff, and really cheering each other on. And then after a time, trust built up, and it was like, oh, why don't we open our own production company? Why don't we? And that's why I was like, boom, boom, boom. I wrote like 3 scripts and got them done, and she gave me the idea that there were people interested and that this was possibly going to go somewhere. And then unfortunately things went sour very quickly and very badly.
Oh no.
So nothing came of it. Why did I start talking about this? See, there's my, ADD. So that's why
Exhibit A.
Even for me to get those projects done, it was because I had someone going like, "Oh my God, share it with me. Oh my God, like let's do this," right? So if I don't have that, I'll work on a novel for a bit, and then I'll be like, especially if I get stumped, I'll be like, "Okay, well that's boring now." Oh my God, I forgot I started writing this 7 years ago. Let's read that and then get back into it, So.
And really, sometimes if you're writing something and you take a break from it and you come back to it, you got a whole fresh perspective, new ideas, and you can dive into it. Then I like to do that too. That's my excuse.
It is great, but the challenging side of it though is that you have to completely reread it, and then sometimes when you reread it, you start editing right away rather than actually progressing.
Yeah, I'm bad about editing while I write, and you only get a couple paragraphs out that way, and you're like, this sentence doesn't look right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the difference between like, I spent 4 hours writing today. Well, how many pages? Well, it wasn't really pages per se. I was just reading and
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you listen to music or anything while you write?
I do, but mainly like instrumentals.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard for me to listen to lyrics because then I start wanting to listen to, like, I'm a huge lyricist because of my writing and my music background, and so I actually really pay close attention to lyrics, and then I want to dissect, like, ooh, what were they feeling, or what were they thinking, what were they trying to say there, or what are they trying to say there because it makes no sense, And so it can be really distracting for me to have lyrics, so I often listen to just instrumental stuff.
Gotcha. So just curious, what was the process of you landing your first screen role? Was that Are You Afraid of the Dark? Am I right?
It was Are You Afraid of the Dark? Yeah, man, you've done your homework. um, so I'd have to back up from that actually. I think I was probably about 7 or 8. Les Miserables, the musical. There was a professional production coming to Ottawa, and on their tour, instead of having a little girl play Cosette and tour with them, they would audition in the city and have the girl perform. And there was an ad in the newspaper, and my mom was like, "Oh, this sounds like fun." And so she decided to teach my sisters and I a song, and then the 3 of us went and auditioned at this open call audition, and I got into the final 2 or 3, I think. And and to me, it was just like, okay, yeah, let's do this. This is fun. Like, I had no idea what was at stake. I had no idea what it was for. I was just like, yep, these are the notes I'm going to go sing. But apparently the director or somebody on the directing team pulled my mom aside and was just like, if she really wants to do this, she could do this. So just letting it's not that we don't like her, blah, blah, blah. And so my mom asked, she's like, do you like doing this? I was like, yeah, it's so much fun. And then so shortly after, that's when I started performing and singing, and my mom found an agent that was local in Ottawa and started getting me auditions. And a lot of those auditions were in Montreal, which is a 2-hour drive from Ottawa. And Are You Afraid of the Dark was one of those. And I don't even remember the audition. I just remember going in on the day of filming. The director was really great. He's very successful director for Hallmark movies and such.
Ron Oliver?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Ron. I've talked to Ron a couple times.
Yeah, he's a great dude. Yeah, but so he gave me my first acting gig, and I just remember okay, girls, you just gotta walk in here and you're gonna scream, and it was just super fun, and I enjoyed it. And then from then on, my mom was like, "Yeah, you want to do this?" And I was like, "Yeah," and she was like, "Okay," and we just kept doing it,
Yeah. So you had no nerves on doing music and such. Were you nervous at all for the screen work?
No, like I don't even remember being like, what? It was just such a simple, like, okay, you're gonna open this door and pretend you see the scariest thing in the world, and you're just gonna scream. And I was like, okay, like it was just fun.
And growing up, I had no idea that Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark were all based in Canada. So there's a lot of crossover between the two, which was just weird for me because I was one of those kids. I was like, I know her, I've seen her, and blah blah blah. Wait, she was in. So that's just one of those things. Was it the Are You Afraid of the Dark opportunity that led to Goosebumps?
Actually, funnily enough, not that I know of. It was just another situation of I just went to another audition, and I was offered the part of Margaret. And then we did the filming and that thing. But when I did the second episode, which didn't happen very often, not a lot of people did 2 episodes, unless it was a 2-parter, obviously, but I mean 2 separate stories. But I did for How I Got My Shrunken Head, which was directed by Ron Oliver. So I'm not sure if it was like, oh, hey, I remember you, sure, or if I kicked the audition's ass. I don't know. You'd have to ask him. But yeah, I was grateful.
Like you said earlier, you were a fan of the Fear Street books. Mm-hmm. Were you aware of like the Goosebumps phenomenon and being a part of it? Was it kind of like, whoa? At
the time, not really. I mean, like I said, I never even read the books. I was all about Fear Street. And unfortunately, there was a lot going on in our lives personally at the time. We just moved from the Quebec side to the Ontario side. I started a new school. And I had been bullied at the previous one, and my mom had said, don't tell people at this school that you want to be a singer and an actress and stuff. Like, it just doesn't seem to go well. And I didn't for some time. But then when we did filming, which I want to say was I can't remember when the filming was. But anyways, the filming was in the fall, obviously. But when it came out, I think it came out in January or something like that. The episode aired in January. I decided, oh, no, these are my friends. They would never be mean to me. And so I told them that I was going to be on the show, and I wore my Goosebumps hat with pride. And unfortunately, they all turned against me like I was this, snobby little shit. And trying to be cool and stuff. And then, yeah, so yeah, I don't remember your question now. I keep forgetting. I keep doing that. I apologize.
No, you're fine. I was just asking if you were aware of how culturally
Oh,
significant Goosebumps was at the time.
right. So yeah, no, unfortunately, because of that incident, I just kind of turtled in, and I didn't really, you know, anytime I felt like I was trying to share my art, and the same thing happened with my music, people just didn't respond kindly, and so like I just was not aware, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now like now I've had people reach out to me like you're not the first podcast that I
Right.
was on. I was on the Goosebumps crew podcast. I did an interview with them earlier last year, or late last year. And, you know, so I still have people reach out and I'm like, oh my God, you're from that episode. So now, very much so in the last, well, probably a couple of decades now, you know, I've been like, wow, man, this really was a thing.
It
You know?
was, and I
Yeah.
I know it's probably weird for you. Probably just think to yourself, I did a couple episodes of this show 30 years ago or whatever.
Hmm.
But those things do stick around, especially with the streaming services and all these episodes are out there. And just
Yeah.
being a kid of the '90s, those
Yeah.
it stuck with me my whole life. It's just one of those things. I just want you to know people appreciated it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, I've heard, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that actually specifically that episode, Stay Out of the Basement, was like some people's favorite episode. I'm not sure why. I don't know. Because I didn't like watch the whole series, but I just heard like in some ways it was the scariest. And so some people just really, that one really stuck with them. And I was just kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool.
And they didn't put all the episodes out on VHS, but Stay Out of the Basement was one of the ones that had its own video release, so it was a
Yeah.
prominent episode.
Yeah. I remember when my daughter was 2 or 3, her daycare provider. She was at an at-home daycare, and her daycare provider was having like a Christmas party or something. I can't remember. And she had this wall of VHS tapes for in the daycare for kids shows and stuff like that. And I was looking through it, and then I saw Stay Out of the Basement, and I was like, oh my god. I don't remember if I told her if the connection was made, but I just remember being like, oh my god, I can't believe that I know somebody that owns that.
Like I've spoken with Ron, but I've also spoken with Robert Tennell, who directed. I think that Tennell's how you say his last name. Frankenstein and Me.
Oh my God, no way.
Hmm.
That's amazing. I haven't spoken to him since the freaking movie.
Yeah, and what are your memories of that audition and that set?
The audition, I don't actually remember. The problem as an actor is that you do so many of them, and your brain doesn't think, okay, I got to remember this one because if I get the part, like, you know what I mean? So I don't really remember the auditioning process. Unfortunately, getting to the set in LA, like trying to get to the shoot was a nightmare for my mom and I. We had so many issues trying to cross like the American crossing guards, or whatever you guys call border patrol.
Yeah, yeah.
We're just not cool. Like they were accusing me of trying to steal American jobs and this kind of stuff, and it was just awful. And the filming itself was so cool. I mean, how can it not be? You're on this real set in LA, and by set I mean like we were in the desert and there was a house. Like I don't mean like a freaking soundstage or anything. Like, but still, like I was just like, oh my god, and like I was told, what's his name? Oh my god, Burt Reynolds.
Burt Reynolds. Yeah.
Yeah, and Louise Fletcher are big deals, and they're part of this movie. So I'm like, oh my god, this is gonna be amazing. Of course, I have no idea who Burt Reynolds is, and like Louise Fletcher even less so, kind of thing. And yeah, so it was very cool. I got along really well with Jameson Belanger and Ricky Maybe, who played the two brothers. Ryan Gosling was great, but I just remember he was very lovely guy, so nice, but just also very like reserved, very like this is my work.
Yeah.
I remember even at that stage, I said to my mom, I was like, that guy's he's gonna, if anybody out of us is gonna do it, it's him, because he was just so like, this is what I'm destined to do for my life, whereas I was like, I really want to, yeah, there were some fun parts of it. The crew were amazing. I loved the crew. There were so many wonderful, wonderful people on the crew. But it was hard. I was the only girl. There was no other girl. And like Burt Reynolds made a point of taking all the boys to a football game and taking them to, what's it called? Universal Studios and to his house and stuff. But like I was never invited to those things.
Mm.
So like I'm very grateful I got along well with the crew and that they didn't mind this 13-year-old girl hanging out with them.
Did you have any scenes with Bert? I haven't seen the movie in so long.
I did not. No, like I think I met the man very much in passing because he happened to be there the same day I kind of thing. Same thing with Louise Fletcher, but no, I didn't really deal with either of them at all. No.
That's another, just the movie, like the theme itself is another powerful movie, especially if you're really young watching it. You know, the dad dies. It's pretty intense, like emotionally, just like.
It is. I know. I remember when I finally got to read the whole script, I was like, "Mom, this is actually really good." You know, and she's like, "That's awesome." And so I was really excited for it. And then when I saw, I don't know how many months after we finished filming, because we filmed in LA and then we were in Montreal for a bit. When we wrapped up the filming after, I don't know how many months, but they said, "Oh, do you want to see the trailer?" And I was just like, "Yeah." And the trailer looked so cool. I was just like, "Oh my God, Mom, this is like legit." And like we're talking 90s, right? So it was like, in a time when, like, you know, it's not like nowadays where it's just like crazy intense images and all this kind of stuff, you know. But I was just like, oh my God, this is legit. This is so cool. And like, I honestly thought this could help me get jobs. I was like, this is the beginning of it for me. And then when I saw the movie, I was a little disappointed. I'm not gonna lie. It's a great movie. The concept's great, and there was nothing done wrong in terms of like the filming of it or the casting or this kind of stuff. It was just, I think, and maybe it's a 90s thing, I don't know. I just felt like there were some things that went on a little too long and some things that didn't really move the story forward that were there and that kind of stuff. Still great, but I just remember watching the movie going like, oh, okay, this isn't going to be, like, I was hoping like maybe it'll be like Free Willy, or maybe it'll be like, you know, or like the Christina Ricci movies like Casper, or, you know, what's that other movie she did with like, oh God, anyways, whatever, it was Demi Moore and anyways, whatever. Now and then, you know, I was hoping that was just kind of like a summer, like, oh my God, all the kids love it. But then, yeah, when I saw it, I was like, yeah, no, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, when I talked to Robert about it, he had the same thought as you, that this was going to be his big thing. You know,
Yeah.
I got Burt Reynolds, man, and
Yeah.
he still has a little bit of sour grapes about it, but he remembers it. Yeah, you know, it happens.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, you always go into things with the best foot forward, right? That's why I always feel badly when you would read stuff in the newspaper or on social media now about like, you know, oh, what was he thinking making this movie? Like, you know, I remember there was quite a few years and a few films there where John Travolta was like the top, and then boom, he just fell so fast because of like Battlefield Earth and a couple other movies that I can't think the name of. And I just remember like reading stuff like that and being like, you guys are being so mean. Like, he doesn't know what the final product is going to look like. And, you know, like, especially as an actor, and I mean, maybe he was a producer, maybe he should have known better. But if you're not a producer, if you're not involved in that end and you just show up and you do your part, you know, there's a lot of moving pieces in making something successful, you know. So like, that's why when you see people go up to get an Academy Award for whatever category, they're always thanking tons of people, because it's not just them that did it, you know?
Right.
And so I always felt badly when people would, you know, really shit on an actor or an artist for, oh, how could they take that part? And it's just like, well, you clearly don't know what's involved in making art. So
Exactly. And I grew up on a lot of B movies, and really what we're talking about is one of the main reasons I like to reach out and speak with you guys, is because, well, I can't give you millions of dollars that you were looking for, but the movies did matter. Even if it's a cult following, you know, some kid loved that movie and, you know, watched it with his mom or whatever. It's just one of those things. It's out there somewhere.
Yeah, no, that's a cool way of looking at it for sure.
Yeah. So if you can remember, out of all the projects you've worked on, which scene had the most takes? Is there one where you just had to do an endless amount of takes and it was just grueling?
In Frankenstein and Me,
or just a period, like all the shows you worked on and movies, whatever.
Not that I can think of. No,
That's
I can't
good.
think of anything. Yeah. No, I think part of the funny part of being the type of actor that it just came natural to me. I hear about method actors. I think Ryan Gosling's really taken into method acting, you know, where he's going to play a driver. He's going to take the job of a driver for several months or several weeks before he goes to shoot, so he can really get his mind frame into it. I mean, I'm not, obviously I'm not making movies like he is, and I haven't got nearly as many projects under my belt, but like with a short stint that I did have, I was never like, oh, okay, like I gotta, it just came naturally to me. I was just like, this is how I think this person would behave at this time. And I was told I was good at it. So, so yeah, I don't remember. Definitely in theater, there have been, when you're blocking and staging it and trying to figure out what the director wants on stage, definitely there'll be a lot of like, nope, I want you to do it this way. Nope, but I found that a lot of the time with filming, and of course that probably goes with being a child actor too. You can only get so much from a child actor. I think they demand a lot more of them now.
Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, especially the 90s and the 80s, when you watch a lot of television where children and movies, they're not even particularly all very good. But it's just a matter of like, we need a child in that role and they look good for the part, and that kind of thing. So maybe I'm not talented. Maybe maybe it was just that. Maybe I look good on camera. I don't know.
I spoke with Noah Hathaway, who played Atreyu in the Never Ending Story.
Love that movie growing up.
And we all love that movie, and but it's heartbreaking to hear him talk about how much he hated doing it. Because, he said that he had to do hundreds of auditions, and they changed directors. He had to do 100 more auditions. There were no child labor laws back then, and he was working 14-hour days. He was bruised up from jumping off cliffs, and it's just one of those things that just puts it in perspective. But the point of me saying that is, he said going to like the conventions and talking to fans about how much they appreciate the movie has changed his relationship with it. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I could certainly relate to that on a much smaller level, of course, because Never Ending Story was huge. I mean, I even had my kids watch that with me. I was like, you have to see this movie, and I can still catch myself singing the song every once in a while, and then of course Stranger Things brought it back.
Yeah.
But like, no, I can definitely relate to that because, like I said, after the Goosebumps, I really turtled in. It was really hard for me, and I wasn't getting jobs, other than Frankenstein and Me. But was that before or after?
It came out in '96, so it might have been like very, very close together.
It might have been like the summer before, and then that fall is when I did Goosebumps. And so, which even more made me feel like, oh my God, look at me, I'm getting work. But yeah, so I turtled in a lot, and it became a negative thing for me because I was just like, wow, like people are making, like they're othering me for doing this and loving it and feeling this is, because to me, I don't know if you watched, the documentary that came out, I don't know when it came out actually, but Demi Lovato directed. It's called Child Star.
I haven't.
Okay, so it's on Disney Plus, and it's got Demi Lovato and quite a few other Disney kids, like Raven Simone, who's also on The Cosby Show. Drew Barrymore is a part of it, and it's just really kind of another take and look into being a child star. Obviously, more specifically Disney, which really, I think, sounds horrendous.
Yeah.
What was my point? I don't know. I lost my point again. I am so sorry.
Hey.
I'm really bad at this.
No,
I just
you're
get
good.
on these little spin-offs, and then I lose it.
Because we were talking about Atreyu and how he's like grown appreciation later in life.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I was saying how I turtled, and then like that ruined things for me, and I don't remember why I brought Demi Lovato into it. Probably because she said something that I was going to connect to it. But anyways, and but yeah, so it wasn't until my adult years, because even my early adult years, I would get random messages from strangers, who, I mean, there's the ones who just say, hey, really loved you on that show. Thank you. So cool that I found you kind of thing. Those ones are fine. But then there's some who, they almost give you this feeling of like, they think you owe them something because they know you. And you're just kind of like, whoa. And that happened a few times in my early like 20s and even into like my mid 30s. And it made me really uncomfortable and almost feel unsafe, especially when social media came out. And so that made me turtle even more and kind of just go like, oh man, I wish I hadn't done Goosebumps in a way.
Yeah, I could see that, yeah.
Yeah, but then thankfully, now I'm getting reached out by people like you and the Goosebumps crew podcasts and stuff who are like, no man, this like changed my life. I loved it. And I'm not talking about my specific part in it, but just like Goosebumps itself. Yeah. And I was just like, oh, that's actually kind of cool. Like, okay, so maybe it wasn't the worst thing to do.
Right. I'm
you
with
know?
you. Yeah, makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. There's a lot of creepy folks in the world.
Yeah, and I don't think everybody who is creepy tries to be. You know what I mean? I think they're just because I've definitely been in situations like I've reached out to celebrities on social media, just like one particular Tyler Levine. He's a Canadian actor. He was in what would you know him from? Oh God, I don't even know. Anyways, he's I love him. I think he's freaking hilarious. I think he's clever. Do you guys have the show New Amsterdam?
I've heard of it, but I haven't watched it myself.
Oh, okay. Well, he plays the psychiatrist in that show, and I just think he's phenomenal. I've been watching him since we were kids because he was on a show with Ryan Gosling. So I kind of felt like, oh, we're in the same boat kind of thing. He's Canadian, all this kind of stuff. Anyway, so I've kind of followed over the years and stuff, and he's one of the few actors where it's just like, oh, Tyler's in it. Oh, I'll watch it kind of thing. Anyways, there was this one movie that my husband really wanted to watch. My husband really, really likes that toilet, like hangover, like actually hangover's funny, but like I'm trying to like bridesmaids, toilet humor, kind of cheap laughs kind of thing, silly, in my opinion. I'm not trying to diss Kristen Wiig and all those wonderful, amazing humans, but and they're not really my type of movie, but there's one he wanted to watch. I can't remember the name of it, but it was with him and a couple of other names that I was kind of like, oh yeah, or faces that I recognized. But it was something like Orgy with My Friends or something like that. Like it's like ridiculous. And so I'm looking at this going like, really, like a movie about a bunch of friends who decide to have a weekend orgy together? Like no. But actually, it was a lot like funnier and more clever than I thought it would be. And I thought Tyler Levine did a fantastic job in it. And so like I messaged him to just be like, you have no idea who I am, but I just wanted to let you know I've watched this and this and this. And then when I saw this, I did not expect to like it, but you were great. And like, and then I sent it and I was like, oh crap, I probably sound like a crazy person. So so like I can be on the other end of it too.
Yeah.
So like I always try to respond, even if I feel like there's a bit of a creep factor. I always try to be like, well, thank you so much. I don't want people to think that I'm immediately like, ew,
Right, yeah.
Because like, especially if they have an emotion tied to that show specifically, whatever it was, whether it scared the crap out of them or it was the last thing they watched with their dad before he left, or like whatever it is, it impacted them in some way and it still means something to them. So I don't want to ruin it by being like completely ignoring, which hopefully doesn't ruin, because a lot of people do that, obviously, or being rude in any way, and of course I've gotten myself in deep shit sometimes with that. I did show kindness to one who ended up being a bit stalker, and I was like, oops.
Yeah.
You have to be really careful.
You do. You really do.
Yeah.
That just reminds me of, I have a friend who's a big time con appearance agent, so he does like bookings for celebrities to go to this convention and that convention.
Okay.
And oh God, the actor's name is slipping my mind, but he played the liquid metal Terminator in Terminator 2, Robert Patrick.
Oh God,
yeah.
that guy.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah. Okay.
So he was with Robert Patrick at a signing, and a fan came up with a poster for one of the movies that he considered, one of his worst roles that he didn't really enjoy making. Yeah. And the fan, had him sign it, and the whole time Robert Patrick wasn't being rude to her, but he was like poo-poo in the movie and was like, oh, yeah, this shit. And he was signing it, and she went off to the side, and my friend Sean saw her like crying over in the corner, and he went over and talked to her and was like, he wasn't trying to, but she said that was one of her mom and hers favorite movies, and her mom died of cancer, and they watched it together.
Oh.
Yeah, so he told Robert Patrick this, and he went over, and he made it right. And that's just a story to show. You never know what touches. Yeah,
that's the thing, right? Like, especially as someone who's felt like I've been bullied and othered a lot, and like, and I've tried to get my art there in so many ways, and people are just not interested, which is real heartbreaking sometimes, So just like, that's why like anytime somebody approaches me or messages me, I try so hard not to just dismiss or shit on their idea of like, I would never say, even though Goosebumps to me was not the greatest, I would never say, oh, that show was sucked and like it was such a waste of my time, because that would it would just sour it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the musicians who talk about, I'm trying to think of you know, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but you know, a musician who's like their biggest hit and they're like, oh, I fucking hate that song. I hate it so much. I wrote it as a joke. I didn't even want to record it, but the guys were like, yeah, let's just put it on the album. And then boom, of course, that's the one that goes freaking platinum or whatever. And it's just like, don't say that, man. That song means like something to a lot of people.
Yeah,
You know?
it does.
Yeah.
So, a question I like to ask everyone near the end is, have you ever had an experience that you would consider supernatural, paranormal, or an event you can't explain?
Not me personally. In fact, in my teen years is where I was saying, you know, there were some troubles that I don't, you know, one of them was that like I used to like pretend to make other paranormal things happen to other people, which wasn't very nice. But I thought it was fun. But there, no word of a lie, my husband and I bought our second house. So this is like, I don't know how many years ago, 17 years ago, more, give or take. And we just moved in, and it was a bungalow, and the kitchen was kind of like a U shape, and they had uppers and lower cabinets and cabinets along the wall and whatnot. And I was leaving for work, and so I was saying goodbye to him, like kissing goodbye, and he's like, yeah, I'm just gonna get in the shower. I hear him get in the shower as I finish getting my lunch or whatever it is, and then I get in the car, and lo and behold, like 3 or 4 minutes later, I get a phone call from my husband going, oh, very funny. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He said he came out of the shower and every single cupboard door was open like this much. The uppers, the lowers, everything. And he's like, you did that? And I'm like, no, I didn't. And for the longest time, he didn't believe me. He was like, oh, yeah, you just don't want to give up the joke. But it's been almost 20 years. And I'm like, it wasn't me. Like, swear to God, it wasn't me.
Poltergeist type deal.
yeah. So I don't know. So it wasn't me, but it was me, kind of, sort of. It happened after I left.
Yeah, at least that's the only thing. It could be worse.
No, for sure. I've always wanted to. Like, there have been so many times where I'm like, I've done the Ouija board thing, the light as a feather, stiff as a board. You know, and even one of my mom's closest friends growing up had a cottage on like this island off of a small town in Ontario, and we used to go. And apparently the island was like a burial site for an Indigenous group, however many years ago. And I didn't know this at all till I was an adult. But apparently my mom said there was one room in the main house. There were bunkhouses for the kids, but the main house, there was one room where if the bed was against the wall, you were guaranteed to have nightmares. But if you didn't have it against the wall, you wouldn't. And my mom didn't know this. And so one of the times she had that room and she pushed the bed against the wall, and she said she had the worst nightmare she ever had. And she came down the next morning exhausted, and her friend was like, are you okay? Like, what's up? And she's just like, oh, I just had the worst nightmares I've ever had. And she's like, oh yeah, just pull the bed away from the wall.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And my mom was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, just pull it away from the wall. And so the next night she pulled away and she didn't have nightmares. So yeah, I don't know. I believe there is something. I believe there is a veil, you know, another parallel, whatever. I don't know what it's called, but I believe there are things and there are ways that communication can happen, but I've never been blessed or cursed with it.
I was saying maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, true, because as much as it might be like, oh, cool, this happened to me, like no one's gonna believe you, you know. And the only people that are the other ones that people think are crazy.
Yeah,
so,
it's usually not good attention that comes with it.
No, exactly. So yeah.
Well, Becky, just to put a bow on this thing here, is there anything on the horizon that you want to share? Anything you're cooking up?
Well, as I said, I'm working on my novel, trying to get a literary agent and whatnot, and so far no success. Dozens of no's. But
all it takes is one yes.
That's all it takes, right? That's all it takes is that one cheerleader, that one person who really not only believes in you, but believes that they can help you get there, you know? And that's one thing that I think I missed in my youth. I had people who believed in me, like my mom and stuff like that, but I didn't have that person who was like, I not only believe, I'm going to help make this happen, you know? So, but yeah, that's all it takes is one yes. So I'll just keep trying, you know, as much as the query letters are so annoying to put together because each query is different.
Yep. You got to personalize each one.
Yeah, you can't just copy and paste and send. So yeah, but other than that, no, not really. I am really excited. I'm going to school in the fall for recreational therapy so that I can use my creative talents to help other people process their their traumas and their issues. And so I'm really excited to open that box and see what it brings.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Beki. I'm rooting for you. I appreciate you giving me some of your time. Had a good time talking with you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I don't quite know how you found me or whatever, but that's great.
Your blog. I emailed you through your blog.
No, I know, but I just don't like. Did you happen upon the blog, or like? Anyways, it could be a whole long story. You don't have to go into
Google.
But yeah. Maybe not a long story then.
You have a great rest of your day, man.
All right, you too. Take care.
See ya.